30-year Vietnam War appears finally to be drawing to a close. It seems clear that all military efforts, like these of the past years, by both the United States and the South Vietnamese, have failed to stop the advance on Saigon of the North Vietnamese communists. All Westerners have been told to leave.
Canadian child care worker Naomi Bronstein puts Vietnamese war orphans she's been looking after here in Saigon on an evacuation flight. Her dream is to give them new lives with adopted parents in the West. But at 35,000 feet, a rear door blows open and the plane crashes. Instead of her dream, Naomi Bronstein is looking at tiny, mangled bodies.
Could I ask you your name?
Bronstein, Naomi Bronstein.
Naomi Bronstein? You put the kids on?
Kids were just on the floor. The babies, the small babies were upstairs. The bigger kids were downstairs with personnel. There was nothing to hold on to.
All these children who never had this chance to survive, they never had a life, they were abandoned, they were abused, they were victims of a war they didn't start, and they were burned, and they were decapitated, and they were dead.
So the plane actually crashed, or was it a crash landing?
No, it went down smooth for a plane with no tail. Landed in a rice paddy, but it landed on its...
And so you're forever changed.
In just a few seconds, Naomi Bronstein's life was shattered. From one small moment came a complete commitment to devote her life to saving sick and dying children in many parts of the world. There are few clues to the roots of Naomi Bronstein's passion in her comfortable, conventional upbringing. A nice house, a father in the textile business, a mother who stayed home to look after the kids. No one seems to know where her strong sense of injustice came from.
It upset her a great deal that there were children who were not able to have food or live in good homes or medical attention. And that upset her. Fortunately, she had it, but she was thinking of others all the time, even as a young girl.
There was nothing in my childhood that, made me see the light or something like that would happen. It was just something that was inside of me. If you want to call it a calling, I guess. I don't know what it was, but it was just always in me.
Naomi was very strong-minded and did exactly what she wanted to do.
My mother used to say things like, I don't know how you could be my daughter. How could you be my daughter? We must have switched babies at the hospital. Or she used to tell me when I was a little kid that she bought me an Eaton's department store because, it was obvious that I couldn't be her daughter because she'd be at night, with her makeup, taking off her makeup and putting on cold cream. And she had the most gorgeous skin and blonde hair and green eyes and, and then there's me. So...
She married when she was just 18. Luckily, Herb Bronstein loved children too, so he agreed when she asked to have a huge family, partly through adopting children.
How did you get into this? I mean, you look to me, if you'll excuse me, like a Holt Renfrew lady, like someone I might see, attractive, might spend her life, a little money, shopping, that kind of thing. How'd you ever get into this?
I was quite the suburban housewife with 3 children, and my husband and I decided that we wanted to adopt a child and heard about the children in Vietnam, especially the black Vietnamese children who were really getting it rough, and followed that along until it came to a point where in '69 I went to Vietnam.
The world's Cold War ideologies had come head-to-head in Vietnam. Hundreds of thousands of U.S. and South Vietnamese troops were at war with the Communist North. As in any conflict, the victims were hundreds of thousands of orphaned and abandoned children. At first, Naomi Bronstein volunteered in overcrowded orphanages.
I knew that there was a way that I could help. These were kids that were going to die. If they were handicapped, chances of survival were limited. A mixed child had no future. The mothers of these children, if they kept the children, they would almost have to go into some sort of seclusion because the neighbors would say, oh, you slept with an American, and therefore they'd be shamed.
She helped found an adoption agency, Families for Children, which accompanied hundreds of orphans to new lives with adoptive parents in the West. And she adopted 4 babies herself. Then she heard that the United States had secretly intensified the war to include neighboring Cambodia. That meant thousands more children at risk, but no one was there to help. She felt she ought to go.
In spite of official denials, there are now confirmed reports that the United States secretly ordered B-52 bombing raids on Cambodia. 15,000 U.S. troops are attacking communist border zones. To add to the chaos, an extreme Marxist group, the Khmer Rouge, has emerged in the countryside. There are an estimated 200,000 refugees.
Very little was known about Cambodia because, of course, America was not supposed to be in Cambodia. So I decided to make a trip into Cambodia and see if there was something we could do to help the kids there, and really was welcomed with open arms and provided with a house.
She turned the house into an orphanage and called it Canada House. As the fighting intensified and the brutal Khmer Rouge advanced from the countryside, it was soon full of malnourished babies.
These women would hand me these babies, these newborns. Their husbands had been killed by the Khmer Rouge. They had no place to stay. They knew that this child would never survive. And it was pathetic. It was just horrible. People feared going to bed at night that the Khmer Rouge would be there in the morning. And so they gave up their babies. Children who were left at my place were children that I promised, whether verbally or silently, to make sure they had the absolute best. We had a staff of wonderful people who worked with the kids and who loved the kids and who were terrified of the Khmer Rouge.
Meanwhile, the Khmer Rouge were advancing on the capital. All Westerners were advised to leave. 65 of the orphans already had paperwork complete for adoption to Canada. And Naomi Bronstein was determined, no matter the risk, to take them to their new futures. The lives of these tiny babies would be miraculously saved more than once before they reached Canada. First, they were bundled into a van and rushed under fire through the streets to Phnom Penh Airport to be evacuated by plane.
The truck moved away very slowly, and all the staff were walking towards us, and they all had their hands like this. And every one of them, men and women, were just crying, and we were sobbing. I mean, because to us, we were leaving them to a certain death. At that time, nobody really knew what was going to happen.
What happened was the death of a nation. The educated classes were forced from the capital to die in the killing fields. The tiny orphans in Naomi Bronstein's care were to escape the genocide of an estimated 1 million people, 1/4 of the population. There was only one way out, back to Vietnam. An American Air Force plane flew them under fire to Saigon. There the situation was just as bad. Almost as soon as they arrived, they were ordered once again to evacuate.
Trying to arrange evacuation for the children from Saigon was very difficult because Vietnam's airports were closed at this time. So we really were without any escape route.
With predictions that Saigon will fall within days, all Westerners have been told to leave as soon as possible. With child care agencies desperate to find a way to evacuate war orphans, President Ford of the United States has announced that a C-5A Galaxy, the largest plane in the world, is on its way to Saigon to start what has been called Operation Baby Lift.
Naomi Bronstein and the 65 orphaned babies she'd brought from Cambodia had been scheduled to evacuate on this flight, which would end in disaster. But fate miraculously intervened. The Canadian Chargé d'Affaires had arranged an alternate Canadian government plane for anyone trying to get to Canada. It would fly out the next day.
And I felt that being the only Canadian, I had this amazing option to get out the next day. And if I didn't take not only my seat, but the 65 seats that the Cambodian kids, it freed up those seats for other children who may not have been able to get on a flight.
So Naomi Bronstein ended up helping her friends and colleagues put Vietnamese orphans headed for America on this plane.
The plane that came in was an American cargo plane that held tanks. We were all very taken aback because the kids had to literally lie down on the floor and have cargo straps holding them down. There wasn't any other option at the time. C-5A took off and the door blew out at 20,000 feet and they tried to make a landing but it crashed.
From the survivors of the crash are now coming details of the horrific
The door on the plane burst open. Some say that as many as 30 passengers may have been sucked out over the China Sea.
160 children and adults who are believed to have died.
Do you think the babies were secure in the plane? Or are you saying that they were
just loose? There was nothing to hold on to.
I suppose there isn't another word to describe it except horror. The second that you thought you saw the worst thing come out of that ambulance, 10 seconds later you saw something worse. These are children and adults who did nothing wrong, who got on a plane to begin their lives, and who were dead. Every ideal that I had on these children was blown away in that 1 second. You know, you live with the horror of what you see. You live with the guilt of the fact that you survived.
At least the orphans she'd rescued from Cambodia were not in the crash. One tiny miracle.
Vietnamese children were on the plane, not Cambodians, so that the parents won't have an absolute hemorrhage in Montreal, all over Canada. Those children are still here.
She did bring the 65 Cambodian babies to their new lives with adoptive parents in Canada. They'd been saved from genocide and from a plane crash. But it was those who died that she couldn't forget.
Naomi was devastated. When she came back for a year, she was like numb. She was a zombie. She couldn't get over the vision of these children coming back like broken dolls.
After coming back to Canada, there were no nights that the images of the crash weren't there. I would wake up screaming all the time. All that effort to live, all for nothing. Never to see the sunshine and flowers. Into that fire my heart went. My soul, its shattered pieces, fed the flames. What can